What's up, guys? It's Brandon Flash. Today you're joining me with a 2024 Tesla Model Y rear-wheel drive. This is the cheapest new Tesla that you can buy net of the federal tax credit, which is now a point-of-sale rebate, so you get it right off the top when you buy it. And we're at a version 3 Tesla supercharger, and we are charging it from 0 to 100% to see how the charge curve is. So like I mentioned, this is a 2024 Tesla Model Y rear-wheel drive. This is the US version of the car, so if you're in anywhere else in the world, including Canada, this is not relevant to you because this is actually a different car than everywhere else in the world gets. This is the Model Y rear-wheel drive that uses the long-range battery, but is software limited. So it's different than the BYD Blade or the LFP pack, so out of Berlin or Shanghai. So those are completely different cars, whereas this is built, I believe, in either Fremont or Texas. I'll have to check. But it uses the long-range pack, but is software limited. So this is 2170 cells, NMC or NCA, I'm not 100% sure, but it's the long-range 2170 pack, not 4680, not LFP. Technically, Tesla recommends you only charge this vehicle to 80% every day, even though it is software limited. So we're going to see what that ends up being as far as actual state of charge when you're top charged. But like I said, we have this down to 0%. Let me show you some data before we plug it in. We're at a version 3, 12-stall supercharger. It's near empty, so we're going to get full power. And this vehicle advertised is 170 kilowatt max supercharging rate. And for reference, my personal Model Y, the Model Y all-wheel drive with 4680 cells, is 230 kilowatts max charging rate. And my Model Y all-wheel drive with the 4680 pack takes 39 minutes to go from 10 to 80%, which is just crazy long. So we're gonna see how this does 0 to 100%. And I have a suspicion that this will actually be faster 0 to 100% than mine is 10 to 80%. But we're gonna prove that today. So this should be about 68 kilowatt hour usable of the about 79 kilowatt hour gross. But let's go look at the CAN data. So we are in the car now. You can see 0% state of charge. Let's just show you what this vehicle looks like. So it's just Model Y. It looks exactly the same as my Model Y all-wheel drive, actually. But you can tell it's rear-wheel drive because that digit there, I believe that's the 7th digit, 8th digit of the VIN is a D instead of an E. So that indicates rear-wheel drive. So then we're in service mode, so you can see battery temperature. We are pre-conditioned, so we're going to be getting best charging possible. There you can see the supercharger that we're at has 9 stalls available of a 12 stall. You can see there are 1 and 2 cars charging back there, so we have plenty of capacity available. In case you're not aware, Tesla superchargers actually do site level load management. So this site being 12 stalls, we have 3 supercharger cabinets there that are about 380 kilowatts each roughly. So if we did have a full charger, we would not be getting full power, or at least there's the potential of not getting full power. So here we have my iPad running Teslax, and this is connected directly to the vehicle CAN bus. And this is where things start to get interesting. So you can see there, battery full kilowatt hour is actually 79.4 kilowatt hour, which when you include the battery buffer there, that's indicating a long range battery pack, but this is a standard range. We're at 0% there, but it's indicating actual 4.6 state of charge from the BMS. We're at 290 volts at the pack voltage and 3 volts at the battery brick voltage or cell voltage. So we're definitely not at full bottom there. If we were at full bottom, it'd be closer to 2.9, 2.8, potentially even 2.7, depending on how low they get it. And what I'm really interested to see is how high they charge these batteries up, being software limited. I suspect rather than the 4.2 max voltage you would see on most vehicles, this will actually top out at about 4 volts. But again, we'll see that soon. But we're at 0%. Battery's nice and warm, 37C minimum temp. But these numbers never fully match. So you can see here in service mode, 37.75, 46.25 or 46.5 now. And then here we have 44 and 44.5. So end of the day, we have a warm battery. That's what matters here. We're going to be plugging in on this version 3 supercharger, and I suspect the curve on this car will be pretty wild. and you're going to see how it is software limited. So let's plug it in. Let me get my cameras rolling, get everything set up to record this, and then I'll show you guys. All right, so we're going to get plugged in, and then you're actually going to join me back at home, and we're going to go over the full charge curve. So we're opening the charge port. We're going to see the magic 7-second handshake time. This is a pretty new supercharger. It's a little bit cool out, so we're not going to hit any thermal limits or anything like that. So blue light there. We're gonna be charging here in just about 7 seconds. We're already handshaked, so 0%. We're ramping up, and let's see what we max out at. This vehicle is rated again for 170 kilowatts. And there you can see we're at 161 kilowatts. So it appears it might actually be about 480 amp limited, which is really interesting. You can see down there as well, 160 kilowatts. And then you're going to join me at home, and we're going to go over this full charging curve. All right, you guys are joining me back at home. We have the full charge curve recording. I've overlaid the Tesla screen recording. We have it in service mode, so we have all the data you could possibly want. I already went over some of the parameters that you're seeing on the Tesla screenshot screen recording in the previous clip while I was still on site. However, I am going to link in the pinned comment down below a section of my Model Y 4680 charge curve analysis that I actually walk through every single thing that I'm showing on the Tesla dashboard, if you will. So that way you can have a little bit deeper understanding. But I went over the important points in the previous one, but if you're curious, it's covered in there. We have this recording playing back at 8x speed. It's a pretty quick charge curve, so it's actually not that long. I think you guys are going to be very impressed. I'm recording this after I've completed all the testing, about a week later actually. And overall, this Model Y just has me pretty confused actually, because it charges so well. And obviously it's a software locked battery, so you get that advantage, but I'm just really torn as to whether this is a good use of a software locked battery, or if this is a good way to achieve really good charging performance, or if you should just be able to have the entire battery, but have kind of the downsides of having the full battery, because if you had the full battery, you'd actually have a worse top charge and you'd have a potentially worse bottom charge. So there are definitely some pros and cons, but one of the big pros is that you're masking all of the potentially downsides of a larger battery by only using the optimal range of it. So the results are pretty hard to argue with. I'm not 100% sure I love the method. If you look at vehicles like the eGMP cars, so the Hyundai Ioniq 5, EV6, cars like that, they charge extremely well, but they're not masking 15+% of the battery. So there's definitely some pros and cons. I would love to hear what you guys think down below on whether this is a good way to make it seem like the charging performance is a lot better than it is. Because again, these results are really hard to argue with. It's an extremely well charging car. And if you haven't already, definitely check out my range test. I'm not going to spoil the result completely here. But the range on this car was actually very close to what its rated range is. And I'm going to call out 100 miles added, 150 miles added, 200 miles added, and 250 miles added based on my real world 70 mile per hour constant loop style range test that I did. And I'll link that in either one of the pinned things up above or in the comment down below, or it's just on my channel, whatever way you want to use to find it. And then in addition to what I did with the 0 to 100% charge curve, I actually did a 10 to 80% charge curve as well. So stick around until after the 0 to 100, and then we'll go over the 10 to 80 as well. And that result is even more remarkable. So without further ado, we're going to start here in just a minute, but familiarize yourself with what's on the screen. We have the Tesla on the bottom left. On the top or on the right side, you're going to see that charge starting screen, but once we actually start charging, I'm going to swipe that away, and then we'll have the service mode screen, so you'll be able to see the current and the battery temperature and the pin temperatures there. It won't line up 100% perfectly as far as what you see, because what's shown on the Tesla screen is actually the power added to the port, whereas on the Tesla screen recording, that's what's going into the battery as far as power and current. So they don't line up 100% correctly, but I lined them up as close as I possibly could within a reasonable margin of error. And then it's also worth noting that the battery temperature on the Tesla screen is pulling directly from the CAN bus data. So I trust that actually more than I trust the service mode battery temperature. And I've experienced this with a couple different Teslas. It's pretty wonky that they have different battery temperatures shown when they're both pulling from the CAN bus. Anyway, I'm not 100% sure what to make of that, but I'll just give you guys all the data. And if someone has some insight into where those different temperatures are pulling from, I would love to hear it because I'm very curious, and I don't 100% know which one to follow. Anyway, definitely pay attention to the battery remaining kilowatt hour. So that's going to show the usable kilowatt hour, including the battery buffer. So worth noting. And then the battery full kilowatt hour, that's how you can tell that this is a software locked battery because that's actually showing the true full capacity of that battery. So let's get to it. We're going to play this recording. And again, this vehicle is rated for 170 kilowatt is the max supercharger speed that Tesla claims. We don't see it, but we'll get to it here. So we started charging. We're immediately up to 160 kilowatt, right at 0% right off the bat. I think my initial claim of it being 480 amp limited was actually incorrect. It seems to be a pretty hard limit on 160 kilowatt roughly into the battery. So that 170 kilowatt claim may have actually been the max through the port that Tesla is claiming. So it's a little bit wonky. We'll see on the 10 to 80% that it actually does go a little bit higher than on this test, but it still does not hit 170 kilowatts through the port. It's also worth noting that with this pretty low peak charging speed, you're not going to get a whole lot of benefit from having a version 3 or a version 2 supercharger. So 5 minutes in, we are already up to 20%. We've already added 14 kilowatt hour, really impressive. Also worth noting that we never exceed 500 amps. So you could actually get this exact same charging performance on a CCS charger that's 500 amp limited, which is also impressive. So having this limited charging capability is actually kind of an upside because you're going to get a lot more consistent experience regardless of the charger speed capability. We're coming up to about 10 minutes here, and we'll already have added over 20 kilowatt hours. So if you figure city driving, that's over 80 miles. We're coming up on 11 minutes, which is 100 miles added, and we're at 40%. So that's 170 mile per hour real world miles driven. That will get you between two superchargers pretty easily in 11 minutes of charging. Really remarkable. You'll also note that we're coming off of 160 kilowatts, so that happened at 41%. So it held that full power all the way to 41%. That's unlike any other Tesla. And I'm going to show you the graph here at the end, but it's a flat line and then it's a very gentle taper. It's unlike any other Tesla charge curve I've ever seen. We're then coming up on 17 minutes here in just a moment, and that will be 150 miles added of real world range. And that's only 6.5 minutes to add another 50 miles of driving range. So really, really impressive. Here we are at 60%, that's 150 miles of real world 70 mile per hour range. And realistically, if I was on a road trip, this is about when I'd unplug, somewhere in the 60 to 70% range. That's giving you a very comfortable 150 miles at highway speeds, maybe a little bit higher than 70, depending on where you are, counts for weather, things like that. And then we're coming up on 20 minutes of charge. So almost 70% in 20 minutes. And that's remarkable. That is a very normal charging stop. You run and use the restroom, grab a snack, walk around, play on your phone, and you're ready to go. The car is ready to go before you are. We're coming up on 80% pretty quick here, and that will be 200 miles of real world range added at 70 miles per hour driving. And that's happening in almost 26 minutes, just under 26 minutes. And again, really, really remarkable. And we're still at 84 kilowatts at 78%. So I'm really happy with that charging performance. We've added over 50 kilowatt hour now at this point. And there we are at 80%. We've added 54 kilowatt hour, and we've added 200 miles of real world driving range. So again, I wish I had better words to describe this charging curve. Other than that, it's just awesome. You can also see the battery temperatures down there. It's running at almost 60 C. So definitely pretty toasty. It's trying to actively cool. We're at 85% now after 28 minutes. We're coming up on 30 minutes, which we'll get to just shy of 90%. And again, this is really good. We're at 75% of the actual battery state of charge. So you can see kind of that disparity and how that shifted over the charge curve, whether that was higher or lower. So just over 30 minutes to get to 90%. And then it's going to be about another 9 minutes or 8 minutes or so to get to 100%. And again, because this is software limited, it can hold that charging speed pretty deep into the battery pack because it's an artificial limit. And you'll see that as we get to 100% indicated, it's actually going to be about 85% real state of charge on the battery. And at 100% displayed is when we'll have added 250 miles of real world driving range. So still just tapering down. You can see the pin temperatures are actually coming down. I didn't see anything alarming there. And we're at 98%. There's really no reason to not charge all the way to 100% if you're at this point, because it doesn't really taper that aggressively at all. Because again, software limited battery pack. And there we go, calculating, and it's now complete at just shy of 39 minutes to go from 0 to 100% charge on this Model Y rear-wheel drive. And again, this is the US spec car. So this has the software limited battery pack. This is not an LFP battery. But what this is indicating to me is that you could actually safely charge this car to 100% every day and really not have any detrimental impacts because it's not actually 100%. Again, I'm of the mindset of drive more, worry less. If you need to use 100%, use it regardless of the battery. And even still, it's better for the battery to have it lower. So if you don't actually need to charge to 100%, if you don't need that much range, still charge it to 80%, even though that is software limited, because even 80% is still, let's see, 68% of the actual battery. So that's even better for the battery than the 85%. But again, drive more, worry less. You shouldn't really have to think about this a whole lot. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, in addition to that 0 to 100% charging test, I also recorded a 10 to 80% charging test. I think the 10 to 80% is a lot more indicative of a real world use case. This vehicle is a little bit abnormal, so that 100 or 0 to 100%, or probably more realistically 10 to 100% is more realistic in this car than it would be in other cars because it's fairly quick. However, 10 to 80% or 10 to 60% or 10 to 70% is a lot more realistic for normal people. Normal people are not running their cars down to 0% every charging stop. They might run it down to 5%, 10%, somewhere in there. That's pretty normal. I typically target somewhere in the 5 to 10% range for supercharger arrival. Like to have a little bit of a margin of error available. But to kind of quote Kyle, I don't know his exact words, but especially in the middle of nowhere, if the difference between if you rolled in with 20% and 0% is essentially nothing, because if you're arriving to the only charger in the entire area, if that charger doesn't work, you're getting a tow truck anyway. So that's kind of a little bit of the risk mitigation there if you're in the middle of nowhere. But if you're in a more populated area or more common corridor, you probably do have other options. So having a buffer could actually be useful to get you to another charger in the off chance that there is an issue, which again, on a Tesla supercharger is very uncommon. So I don't generally worry about charger reliability. They just work. Occasionally you might have to switch stalls, but that's totally fine if needed. And that's even pretty rare. So anyway, we're going to jump in. You'll see that we're starting at 10%, which is 12.8% indicated for the actual raw battery state of charge. And let's just start this recording here. So we're starting at 10%, shoots right up to 160 kilowatts, the rated charging performance that it seems to stick with, even though they claim 170, seems to peak right at 160 into the battery. Battery is warming up here, as you can see, but it is attempting to cool it down. We're actually going to be holding this 160 peak kilowatt until all the way 41%. When we get to 50%, that will be 100 miles added, and that's going to happen in about 10 and a half minutes, which is really remarkable. Just under 5 minutes here. So 5 minutes, we've already added almost 20% to the battery, 13 kilowatt hour, and we're still holding steady. Here you can also see something that a lot of people don't seem to understand is that voltage is varying through this charge curve. That's to be expected as the battery is charging. And as that voltage is coming up, the current is going down. So that's again normal because this seems to be a kilowatt limit artificially imposed on this battery, because on the long range cars, this battery will charge at 250 kilowatts or even slightly higher. We're coming up on the taper point, so we're just coming off of 160 kilowatt here. It's actually holding it a little bit deeper than it did on the 0 to 100. So we're now under 150 kilowatts at 49%. And 50% again is that 100-mile added point with the 70-mile-per-hour range test. So a very usable range. A lot of superchargers are about 100 miles apart on the more rural parts of the country. So you could actually do that charger hop with about 10.5 minutes of charging, which is really impressive. We're coming up on 70% here in just a moment. That will be about 17 minutes of charging, and that will be 150 miles added charge. And now we're coming under 300 amps. Battery is again pretty toasty. These batteries like to be warm, about 60 C as they warm up. And we're still over 100 kilowatts at 67% indicated. And we're going to be coming under 100 kilowatts, probably around 70%. And again, that 70% is 150 miles added. So 70%, 17.5 minutes-ish, and that's 150 miles added. We're just now coming under 100 kilowatts at 72%. And the time remaining is actually proving to be pretty accurate. So here we are, 20 minutes, 75% indicated state of charge. That's a ton of range added in that 20 minutes. And again, that's a pretty normal stop. And just a little bit left. So we're coming up on 80% in 22 minutes, which is just absolutely remarkable. So now that we've finished talking about the charge curves, showing you the charge recordings, I'll show you some graphs here. It really hammers home how good this charging curve is when you see these graphs. 0 to 100%, it has an average charging speed of 108 kilowatt going to 0 to 100%, which is awesome. I don't know of any other Tesla that has that other than maybe Model S or X, but even those, as you're going 0 to 100, they might have a lower average kilowatt than that. The lowest charging speed we saw on the 0 to 100% charge recording was actually 50 kilowatts, and that was at the very top, or I think it was 47 kilowatts technically, but call it 50. And that's just awesome. I mean, you could do a road trip and charge it 0 to 100% and be fine, especially if you're taking like a lunch stop or dinner stop or something. You might actually incur idle fees or have to go out and move your car, even charging to 100% if you're having a meal stop or something. It's arguably maybe a little too fast, as crazy as that sounds. I know I've personally taken advantage of some of the top balancing and how long that takes on road trips if I'm finishing a meal or something and just want to really have some time at the top, if you will. But really good. That 39 minutes is the same as going from 10 to 80% in my Model Y all-wheel drive with the 4680 battery pack, just to give you a comparison. So the Model Y rear-wheel drive is adding 20% more energy in the same amount of time, because those, as far as the usable kilowatt hour, are nearly identical between those two. And I'm going to have a whole video comparing the Model Y rear-wheel drive charging performance versus my 4680 Model Y all-wheel drive performance. And I think you guys are going to be surprised, or maybe not surprised, but the Model Y rear-wheel drive does way better. So if you haven't subscribed, that's coming. And then on the 10 to 80% charging curve, we averaged 132 kilowatts from that entire range. And over half of it was spent at max charging power. And even once we came off of max, it was still charging really fast. And 22 minutes on a base level car that goes for $35K plus or minus after tax credit is awesome. I would have no reason not to recommend this car to just about anyone, because the charging performance rocks. It doesn't have the most range. I'd say it has more than adequate range for most people, but realistically on a road trip, this versus the long range, other than that first charging stop that you have, or that first leg when you're leaving from home, assuming you're leaving with 100%, this is probably right on par as far as road trip capabilities. You might have very slightly faster charging stops on that long range if you're using the full battery pack, because it does have a higher peak of 250 kilowatts, and you do have more usable range on that car. But otherwise, this is totally road trippable, and you wouldn't have any complaints. It would just work. You could do 15 to 20 minute stops, continue on, and you're stopping every 2 hours-ish, roughly. And I mean, that's pretty normal in my opinion. But would love to hear what you guys think. If you haven't already, comment down below, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and let me know what you guys think of videos like this. Thank you guys for watching.